Ada used to think her marriage had a steady rhythm, like the gentle hum of a generator that didn't sputter. Rare, precious, almost suspicious in Lagos. Jonah would wake before his alarm, stretch like a man rehearsing calm, and move around the bedroom with the quiet confidence of someone who believed life was under control. Ada liked that about him. The way he spoke in measured sentences, the way he folded his shirts with the seriousness of a priest arranging altar cloth. Their home wasn't the loud kind of happy. It was the soft kind. Shared glances over tea, light arguments about whether bread should be toasted, and a playlist that always returned to old love songs whenever the evening became too silent. Yet lately, that silence had started behaving strangely, like a visitor who refused to announce themselves. Jonah would smile, and Ada would smile back, but sometimes she'd catch his eyes lingering too long on nothing at all, as if he was listening to a different conversation happening somewhere inside his head. The travel plan came like harmless news, the kind of announcement that should have been ordinary. Ada's aunt had called from another state, a small family matter that required Ada's presence for just a couple of days, nothing dramatic, nothing to fear. Jonah acted supportive, almost eager. He helped her choose outfits, joked about how she'd return speaking with a new accent, and promised the house would remain standing in her absence, as though their furniture had legs and could misbehave. He even insisted on taking her to the airport himself, despite the traffic, despite the early hour, despite how he usually complained that airport roads are built for stress. Ada teased him about this sudden devotion. "Aha, so you finally become romantic," and Jonah laughed a little too quickly, like a man trying to clap over a crack in a wall. He said, "Let me spoil my wife small. Is it a crime?" If it was, he wore the handcuffs, like jewelry. That night, Ada packed with a neatness that was almost ceremonial, folding clothes, checking documents, charging her phone, and reminding Jonah where things were in the kitchen, as if he hadn't lived there for years. Jonah listened, nodding, smiling, pretending to be offended that she didn't trust him to find the salt. "Madam, I'm not a baby," he protested, and Ada laughed, tossing him a look that said, "Please, you are somebody's baby." They ate dinner, talked about little things, and Jonah offered to set an alarm so he wouldn't oversleep. Ada noticed the way he kept checking his phone face down, tapping it like it contained a secret heartbeat. When she asked who was messaging, he said, "Work people. You know they don't rest." Ada accepted it, because trust is sometimes just exhaustion wearing a brave face. She lay down later and watched him breathe, steady and deep, and tried to ignore the tiny feeling that something was being arranged quietly, carefully, like a stage being set before an audience arrives. Morning arrived dressed in soft gray light, the kind that makes even noisy streets look gentle for 5 minutes before Lagos remembers itself. Ada woke early, bathed, dressed, and moved around the room with that calm efficiency she carried like perfume. Jonah, on the other hand, behaved like a man auditioning for Husband of the Year. He offered to carry her bag, made sure her perfume was packed, and even remembered her ginger sweets for the flight, which was suspicious because Jonah usually forgot his own belt. He cracked jokes while she adjusted her scarf, calling her Madam Traveler, and Ada rolled her eyes in affectionate annoyance. Under the humor sat something tighter. Jonah's laugh had a sharp edge, the way laughter sounds when it's trying to drown a thought. Ada couldn't name what she felt, only that Jonah's attention was heavier than usual, as if every gesture had been rehearsed in front of a mirror. The drive to the airport was smooth by miracle, and Jonah talked too much, filling the car with words like he was afraid silence would ask questions. He told Ada a story about a man who missed his flight because he stopped to buy gala, and then remembered he was fasting halfway through chewing. Ada laughed, shaking her head, and said Jonah should stop confusing his stomach with his destiny. Jonah grinned, but his fingers tightened briefly on the steering wheel when his phone vibrated. He didn't pick it up. He didn't even glance. He simply drove, eyes forward, shoulders a little too stiff, like a man sitting beside a hidden fire. Ada watched him from the corner of her eye, trying to read the map of his face, the familiar lines, the usual confidence, the small crease between his brows that appeared when he was calculating. "You're quiet, oh," she said lightly. Jonah quickly replied, "Me? Quiet? It's you that is leaving me." He made it sound like a joke, but it landed with an odd weight, like a coin dropped into a deep well. At the drop-off point, Jonah parked, stepped out, and opened the trunk like the moment mattered. He lifted her suitcase with care, placed it beside her, and then pulled her into a hug that lingered longer than necessary. His arms felt strong, familiar, and yet Ada sensed a strange urgency in him, as if he wanted to memorize her shape before she disappeared. He kissed her forehead first, then her lips, slow and deliberate. "Call me when you land," he said, voice low. Ada smiled. "I will. Don't use my absence to eat only noodles." Jonah laughed. "See this woman. I'm a responsible man." He kissed her again, softer, and whispered, "Safe trip." Ada turned to go, feeling loved, feeling secure, feeling like the world was steady under her feet. Behind her, Jonah watched her for a moment, then looked away quickly, like a man afraid his own eyes might confess. Ada walked into the terminal and vanished into the crowd, swallowed by rolling suitcases, loud announcements, and the particular impatience of people who believe time is personally insulting them. She didn't look back, because why would she? Her husband had kissed her goodbye, like a man who adored her, and love, when it feels certain, doesn't check over its shoulder. Jonah waited just long enough to be seen waiting. He leaned against the car, arms folded, face arranged into a careful expression, half proud husband, half tired chauffeur. When Ada was fully out of sight, Jonah exhaled. Not the normal exhale of a man relieved his wife had safely entered the airport, but the deeper one, like someone releasing a secret he had been holding in his chest. He slid into the driver's seat, closed the door, and finally allowed himself to look at his phone. The screen lit up with a message that had no business being so cheerful. "Miriam, I'm ready. Are you?" Jonah stared at the words like they were a dare. His thumb hovered. For a second, the weight of his own life sat on his lap, the marriage, the home, the years, Ada's laughter, Ada's patience, Ada's quiet sacrifices that never came with receipts. Jonah's conscience coughed politely, hoping to be acknowledged. But Jonah was already negotiating with himself. "Just today. Just while she's gone. No one will know." He typed back, "Yes. Come. I'm on my way." He hit send and felt something twisted and hot in his stomach. Not quite excitement, not quite fear. More like a man stepping into a river he has pretended is shallow. Then he started the car and drove away from the airport, leaving behind the woman who believed she was traveling away from home, unaware that home was already being rented out by Betrayal. Traffic tried to slow him down, but Jonah's mind was faster than any road. He drove with the urgency of a man running to his own mistake. Along the way, he rehearsed lies like prayers. If Ada called, he would say he was at home sleeping. If she texted, he would reply late and blame network. If she needed anything, he would sound caring, because caring was easy when it cost nothing. Jonah's phone buzzed again. "Miriam, I'm close." Jonah replied with a simple thumbs up, the lazy confidence of someone who thought he was in control. Yet the truth was already in motion, like a stone rolling downhill, quiet at first, unstoppable later. He imagined Miriam in his house, imagined the thrill of secrecy, imagined how quickly everything would return to normal when Ada came back. The thought made him smile, and that smile should have warned him, because it was the kind that grows on a face right before consequences arrive. Miriam arrived at the compound like she had visited 100 times, though she hadn't, not officially. She didn't knock for long. She didn't wait. She simply reached into her handbag and produced a key that didn't belong to her, a small piece of metal heavy with disrespect. The lock clicked open with embarrassing ease, like the house itself had been trained to obey her. She stepped inside and paused, taking in the living room, Ada's curtains, Ada's throw pillows, Ada's framed photos where Jonah and Ada smiled like they had never heard of evil. Miriam smirked as if the pictures were jokes told in poor taste. She kicked off her shoes, then stopped, reconsidered, and placed them neatly by the door, because even thieves enjoy pretending they have manners. She walked deeper into the house, touching things lightly, as though checking ownership. "So this is the famous house," she murmured, half mocking, half impressed. She didn't behave like a guest. Guests ask. Guests hesitate. Miriam moved like she had rights. She opened the fridge and frowned at the orderliness, containers labeled, vegetables washed, everything positioned with Ada's quiet discipline. Miriam found a bottle of wine Jonah had once claimed was for special occasions and laughed. "Special indeed," she said, popping it open with the confidence of someone who believed she was the occasion. She sprayed perfume in the air, too sweet, too loud, then rearranged a cushion, as if the cushion had offended her. She glanced at the wall clock and typed quickly on her phone, "I'm inside." Then, almost as an afterthought, she added, "Your wife's house is too clean. Does she even enjoy life?" That was Miriam's kind of humor, sharp enough to cut, careless enough to leave scars. She sat on the sofa and crossed her legs, waiting like a queen, expecting her servant to return. When Jonah finally arrived, he stepped into the house and immediately smelled the change. Perfume that wasn't Ada's, the air slightly warmer, like the home itself was uncomfortable. Miriam rose with a wide grin and wrapped her arms around him. Jonah laughed, but it came out too loud, too forced. Miriam teased him, calling him responsible husband, and Jonah tried to play along. He poured wine, clinked glasses, and pretended the house wasn't watching him. They talked in low voices, voices that belonged to people sharing a crime. Jonah kept glancing at his phone, half expecting Ada's name to flash across the screen. When it didn't, he relaxed, sinking deeper into the lie. Miriam leaned in close and said, "So, she's gone." Jonah nodded. "She's gone." He said it like a door closing. And yet, outside, fate was turning around. Somewhere in the airport, Ada's flight was preparing to disappoint her. Somewhere in the sky that Jonah imagined she occupied, there was nothing, no plane, no distance, no safety buffer. Jonah didn't know that yet. He didn't know the truth was not traveling away. It was coming home. At the gate, Ada sat with her boarding pass in hand, listening to the airport's endless chorus. Names called, bags rolling, babies complaining like tiny landlords. She checked her phone and smiled at Jonah's earlier message, simple, sweet, ordinary. She imagined him at home, probably eating something he shouldn't, probably watching football with the volume too high. Ada's mind drifted to the small tasks awaiting her after the trip, laundry, groceries, the gentle rhythm of home. Then the announcement came, calm and professional, like bad news dressed in polite clothing. The flight was delayed. People sighed and groaned as if the delay had personally insulted their mothers. Ada stayed patient, scrolling her phone, telling herself delays were normal. Minutes stretched. Another announcement followed, quieter but sharper. The flight was canceled due to a mechanical issue. The gate erupted into noise, complaints, anger, bargaining with the universe. Ada blinked, processing the words like they were written in a language she didn't speak. Her first instinct was Jonah. She dialed his number immediately. It rang, and rang, and rang. No answer. Ada tried again, this time with that slightly irritated humor wives use when they assume their husbands are doing something foolish. Still nothing. She sent a text, flight canceled. "I'm coming back." The message delivered, but no reply appeared. Ada's eyebrows tightened. Jonah always answered, even if it was to say, "I'm in the bathroom." Ada called again, holding the phone to her ear as if she could force it to behave. Nothing. It was a small thing, a harmless thing, until it wasn't. Because silence, when it comes from someone who should be available, starts to sound like a door being bolted from the inside. Ada stood in the line for rebooking, but her thoughts were no longer in the airport. They were on the road between the terminal and her home, racing ahead like anxious messengers. She told herself Jonah might be driving, might have dropped his phone, might be asleep. She tried to laugh at her own overthinking. "Ada, stop acting like a Nigerian film heroine." She scolded herself, yet her chest felt tight. The woman behind her complained loudly about airlines, and Ada almost wanted to thank her for the distraction. When her turn came, Ada accepted the rebooking options, but chose not to wait. Something in her demanded home, demanded clarity. She booked a ride and tightened her grip on her suitcase. Outside, the air felt different, cooler, sharper, more honest. Ada stared at her phone one more time, willing it to light up with Jonah's name. It stayed dark. And in that darkness, a new kind of fear began to form, quiet, patient, and terribly awake. The ride home felt longer than geography allowed. Ada sat in the back seat with her suitcase upright beside her, hands folded on her lap, posture calm, mind noisy. The driver tried small talk, complaints about fuel prices, a joke about airport delays being a national sport. But Ada answered with polite nods and soft smiles that didn't reach her eyes. Her phone lay face up on her thigh, like a dare. She checked it once. Nothing. She checked again, pretending she was only confirming the time. Still nothing. Ada told herself Jonah must be asleep, or driving, or inside the bathroom with the door locked and water running, because, truly, men had a talent for being unreachable only when it mattered. She almost laughed at the thought, the way one laughs at a joke that refuses to be funny. Outside the window, the city slid by in familiar fragments, shops she knew, junctions she'd memorized, each landmark whispering, "You are close now. You are close now." She sent another text measured and light, the kind that refused to sound worried. "I'm on my way back. Call me when you see this." Ada didn't add emojis. Emojis felt like begging. She imagined Jonah reading it later and apologizing, imagined herself rolling her eyes and forgiving him before he finished his sentence. That was how forgiveness worked in her mind, efficient, economical, almost humorous. Men, she thought, are like radios with bad signals. You tap them and hope they cooperate. The driver took a shortcut, bumping over a road that had seen better decades, and Ada's suitcase rattled like it was also impatient. She steadied it with her foot and breathed slowly, practicing calm like a habit she'd mastered. When the car finally pulled into her street, Ada paid and thanked the driver, lifting her suitcase with the practiced ease of someone who had carried her life for years without complaint. The house stood exactly where it should, quiet, ordinary, obedient to routine. The lights were on. That comforted her. He's home, she thought. She rolled her suitcase toward the door, already rehearsing a mild scolding about unanswered calls. It would end in laughter. It always did. Ada believed this the way one believes in gravity, without checking whether the ground had quietly disappeared. The front door didn't open. Ada tried again, more firmly this time, turning the handle with a confidence that expected compliance. Locked. She paused, eyebrows knitting together, then knocked lightly. No answer. She knocked again, louder, the sound echoing in a way that felt too big for such a small moment. Ada checked her phone and called Jonah. It rang. And rang. Nothing. She pressed the doorbell, listening to its chime drift into the house like a polite request that went unanswered. This is strange, she thought, not alarmed yet, just irritated in the way one gets when things refuse to follow the script. Jonah knew she was traveling. He knew she might come back early. Why lock the door and disappear inside the house like a secret? She stepped back from the door and glanced around the compound, scanning for signs of life, neighbors passing, a curtain twitching, anything that could explain the delay. The house remained quiet, stubbornly composed. Ada sent another message, this time shorter. I'm at the door. She waited, listening to the hum of distant traffic, to her own breath, to the silence that had started behaving like a person who knew more than it should. A minute passed. Then another. Finally, she heard movement, soft, rushed, clumsy, followed by the sound of the door unlocking. Jonah opened it wearing confusion like a costume. His hair was rumpled, his shirt creased, his eyes blinking too slowly, as though he'd been dragged out of sleep that didn't exist. Ada, he said, stretching the word. You're back. She stared at him, measuring. The flight was canceled, she replied simply. Jonah rubbed his face, performing tiredness with commitment. I was sleeping. My phone must have been on silent. Ada looked past him into the living room. Everything seemed normal, too normal. No obvious disorder. No noise. No extra presence announcing itself. The irritation softened slightly. Maybe I'm overthinking, she told herself, stepping inside as Jonah closed the door behind her a little too carefully. Inside, Jonah apologized again, his words tumbling over each other like they were competing for forgiveness. Ada waved it off, exhaustion finally catching up with her. She noticed a pair of slippers by the door that didn't belong to either of them. Her eyes lingered for a fraction of a second, long enough to register, not long enough to accuse. Jonah noticed her notice. He spoke quickly, almost tripping over the explanation. "Oh, those? A neighbor came earlier. Power issue. She needed to charge her phone small. She left." He laughed awkwardly, adding, "You know, these days, NEPA has turned us into mobile charging stations." Ada nodded slowly. The explanation sat oddly, like a shoe on the wrong foot, but she was too tired to bend down and adjust it. She wheeled her suitcase toward the bedroom, moving with the grace of someone who had spent her patience elsewhere. Jonah followed her with anxious attentiveness, offering water, asking if she was hungry, suggesting she rest. Ada smiled faintly. "I just need to lie down," she said. "Today has been long." Jonah agreed too quickly, as if rest was a strategy he needed her to adopt. She didn't hear laughter. She didn't hear whispers. She didn't hear the sound of guilt scrambling for shelter. The house behaved, holding its breath like a trained accomplice. As Ada settled onto the bed, the ceiling fan stirring warm air into something tolerable, Jonah hovered in the doorway. He asked if she needed anything else, his voice pitching itself into kindness. Ada closed her eyes. "No, I'm fine," she said. Jonah stood there a moment longer than necessary, then left quietly. Ada listened to his footsteps retreat, to the house settling back into stillness. Fatigue pressed down on her, heavy and convincing. Whatever questions had gathered earlier softened, blurred by tiredness. She turned onto her side and exhaled. The bed welcomed her like an old friend. Above her head, unseen and unheard, a different kind of discomfort was beginning to bloom. In the ceiling, Miriam learned quickly that heat speaks. It speaks in sweat and panic, in shallow breaths and cramped limbs, in the cruel realization that hiding is harder than arriving. The space was tighter than Jonah had promised, dustier, hotter, and far less forgiving. She shifted carefully, trying not to make a sound, every movement negotiated like a fragile treaty. Her phone vibrated in her hand as she typed furiously. "Jonah, I can't stay here long. It's hot. How do I leave?" She pressed send and wiped her forehead with the back of her wrist, smearing dust into sweat until she looked like regret personified. Below, Jonah paced the living room with the restless energy of a man juggling knives. He checked his phone, glanced at the bedroom door, checked his phone again. Miriam's message arrived, and his stomach tightened. He typed back quickly, "I'll get her out. I'll convince Ada to go out. Just stay quiet." He added a prayer emoji he didn't believe in. He wiped his hands on his trousers, trying to calm his breathing. The house, moments ago his safe place, now felt like a courtroom waiting for evidence to speak. Miriam shifted again, a bead of sweat sliding down her neck. She stared at the wooden frame inches from her face and wondered how desire had turned into this, how quickly thrill became inconvenience. She typed again, "Hurry. I can't breathe properly." Jonah read it and closed his eyes briefly, as though blinking could erase physics. He straightened his shirt, practiced a smile, and walked toward the bedroom with the careful confidence of a man about to propose a bad idea, as if it were a gift. Jonah knocked softly and stepped into the bedroom. Ada lay on the bed, eyes half closed, one arm draped over her stomach, the posture of someone who had surrendered to fatigue. He spoke gently, rehearsed charm coding his words. "Babe," he said, "since you're back, maybe we should step out small. Get groceries. Fresh air." He smiled like this was spontaneous, like the idea had just floated down from heaven. Ada opened one eye and looked at him. The look wasn't suspicious. It was tired. "Not now," she replied. "I really just want to rest." She rolled onto her side and closed her eyes again, sealing the decision. Jonah's smile faltered for a fraction of a second before he recovered. "Okay, no problem," he said too quickly. He lingered, hoping she'd change her mind, hoping rest would suddenly become boredom. It didn't. Ada's breathing slowed, steady and unbothered. Jonah backed out of the room, closing the door softly, his mind racing. In the ceiling, Miriam waited, heat tightening its grip, time turning heavy. Jonah returned to the living room and paced, hands on his head, checking his phone like it might offer mercy. He typed back. She refused. I'm trying. The house held all of them in place, Ada resting, Jonah unraveling, Miriam sweating above the truth. Nothing exploded yet. Nothing confessed. The danger lay in waiting, in the small, accumulating moments that push people into mistakes. Jonah sat, stood, sat again, unable to settle. He had believed this day would be easy. He had believed he was clever. Somewhere between the locked door and the refused outing, that belief began to wobble, thin as the ceiling board above his head. Ada slept, but it wasn't the deep, careless sleep she had hoped for. It was the kind that hovers, half in rest, half in awareness, where the body lies still but the mind keeps one eye open. The ceiling fan hummed steadily, slicing warm air into something manageable, yet her thoughts wandered without permission. She dreamed of airports and doors that wouldn't open, of phones ringing endlessly in empty rooms. Each time she shifted, the mattress responded with a familiar creak, grounding her in the present. Somewhere in the house, Jonah's footsteps moved without rhythm, slow, then fast, then slow again. Even asleep, Ada registered the restlessness like background noise one grows used to in a long marriage. He's probably anxious because I returned suddenly, she thought, generosity stepping in before suspicion could stretch its legs. Jonah, meanwhile, had discovered that waiting could be louder than shouting. He stood in the living room, phone clenched in his hand, staring at the bedroom door like it was a judge who had not yet decided his sentence. He typed and erased messages to Miriam, unsure what reassurance would sound like when he didn't feel reassured himself. Sweat gathered at his temples, though the room wasn't hot. He opened the fridge, closed it, opened it again, as if hunger might save him. It didn't. He lowered the television volume to 0 and still flinched at imagined sounds. Every tiny creak of the ceiling felt amplified. Every second stretched thin and dangerous. Jonah had never understood how houses could feel alive until his own began conspiring against him with silence. Above them, Miriam lay curled in discomfort, knees pulled close, phone glowing faintly in her hand. The heat pressed against her like punishment. Dust clung to her skin, and every breath tasted stale. She typed another message, slower this time, conserving energy. Please. I can't stay much longer. Jonah read it and closed his eyes, pressing his fingers against them like he could push the problem back into darkness. He whispered promises he couldn't guarantee. Promises meant more for himself than anyone else. Below, Ada shifted and sighed in her sleep. Above, Miriam waited. And in between them, Jonah stood trapped by a lie he had built too carefully to dismantle quickly. Ada woke briefly to the sound of Jonah's voice, soft, almost rehearsed, asking if she needed water. She opened her eyes, saw his face hovering with concern, and shook her head. I'm fine, she murmured. Jonah nodded too eagerly, as though the answer had saved him from something. He lingered anyway, adjusting the bedsheet that didn't need adjusting, straightening a pillow that was already straight. Ada watched him through half-lowered lashes, noting the way he avoided her eyes, the way his hands kept moving as if stillness might expose him. You're sure you don't want to go out later? He asked again, too casually. Ada frowned slightly. Jonah, please. I just want to sleep. Her tone wasn't angry. It was final. He backed away at once, hands raised slightly in surrender. Okay. Rest well, he said, smiling too hard. As he left the room, Ada turned onto her side, facing the wall. She didn't feel threatened. She didn't feel afraid. She simply felt unsettled. It was the kind of feeling you get when a song plays in the wrong key, not wrong enough to stop listening, but wrong enough to notice. She reminded herself she was tired, that tired minds invent mysteries where none exist. She closed her eyes again, determined to sleep properly this time. In the living room, Jonah sat and stood in restless cycles, checking the time like it might move faster if watched closely. His phone buzzed again. Miriam. I'm dizzy. Jonah. He swallowed hard and typed back reassurance he didn't feel. Just a bit longer. Please. He glanced toward the ceiling, then away quickly, afraid his eyes might betray him. The house felt smaller now, compressed by secrets, its walls listening with professional patience. Jonah's thoughts began tripping over each other. What if she hears something? What if Ada wakes? What if? He cut the thought short, rubbing his face roughly. Panic, he realized, was not loud. It was quiet, methodical, and deeply inconvenient. Above, Miriam shifted again, the movement sending a faint tremor through the ceiling board. She froze instantly, breath held, heart racing. Nothing happened. No sound below. Relief washed over her, thin and temporary. She typed one last message, slower now, fingers trembling. I don't think this place can hold me. Jonah read it and felt the truth settle heavily in his chest. He had run out of time. The only question left was how the truth would choose to arrive. Ada drifted between sleep and wakefulness, her mind swimming through soft, disconnected thoughts. She dreamed she was standing in her living room while rain fell indoors, dripping from the ceiling in slow, deliberate drops. In the dream, Jonah kept talking, explaining the rain away as a plumbing issue, as weather behaving badly. Ada wanted to laugh at the absurdity, but before she could, a sharp sound cracked through the house. Thud. Her eyes snapped open. The sound wasn't loud, but it was wrong. Too close. Too solid. Ada sat up slowly, heart pounding once, then steadying itself like it always did. She listened. Silence returned, thick and suspicious. Jonah heard it too. His entire body reacted before his mind could catch up. He jumped to his feet, eyes darting to the ceiling, to the bedroom door, back to the ceiling again. His phone buzzed wildly in his hand. Miriam's name flashed like a warning light. He didn't open the message. He already knew. The house seemed to inhale sharply, bracing. Jonah took a step toward the ceiling access point, then stopped, realizing movement itself could be evidence. He forced himself to breathe, to stand still, to look innocent in a room that had already stopped believing him. Above, Miriam's world tilted. The board beneath her foot shifted unexpectedly, weaker than it had looked. Panic erased caution. She reached out instinctively, fingers scraping against nothing solid, her phone slipping from her hand. The ceiling groaned, a low, tired sound, before giving way. Gravity, patient and honest, did the rest. The fall was sudden, unplanned, inevitable. The crash that followed was unmistakable. The sound tore through the house like a confession. Dust exploded into the air as the ceiling gave up its secret, and Miriam fell through it in a flurry of limbs and embarrassment, landing hard but conscious, frozen in shock as much as pain. Ada stood in the bedroom doorway, eyes wide, not screaming, not moving, just staring at the impossible scene unfolding in her home. For a moment, nobody spoke. The air filled with dust motes floating lazily, illuminated like they were part of a carefully planned reveal. Miriam was the first to move. She pushed herself upright with a sharp inhale, waving her hand dismissively, as if the fall were nothing more than a misstep on a staircase. "I'm fine," she said too quickly, her voice strained but determined. She forced a laugh that landed badly. Just slipped. Her eyes darted to Jonah, searching for rescue, for instructions, for anything that might turn gravity into coincidence. Her body trembled, not violently, but enough to betray her. Ada remained calm. Shock sat on her face, yes, but it didn't control her. She didn't rush forward. She didn't shout. She simply looked from Miriam to the broken ceiling, then to Jonah, slowly, deliberately, like someone assembling a puzzle with all the pieces finally in view. The silence she offered was not confusion. It was space. Dangerous space. Jonah broke first. He rushed forward, words spilling out before Ada asked a single question. "Ada, wait, it's not, let me explain. She was just, this is not what you think." His voice tripped over itself, explanations colliding, excuses arriving overdressed and late. He gestured wildly, pointing at the ceiling, at Miriam, at nothing in particular. Each sentence contradicted the last. Each word added weight to the truth he was trying to float away. Ada watched him quietly, her expression unreadable. The house listened too, absorbing every unnecessary explanation like a witness who would never forget. Ada finally moved, stepping fully into the living room. She didn't hurry. Her calm unsettled everyone more than shouting ever could. She looked at Miriam, who was still waving off her pain with forced bravery, insisting she was okay while her breathing told a different story. Then Ada looked at Jonah, who had begun explaining again how it was a misunderstanding, how things had gotten out of hand, how he had only meant to help someone. Ada raised a hand gently. Jonah stopped mid-sentence, stunned into silence by the simple authority of the gesture. "So," Ada said quietly, her voice steady, "this is what fell from my ceiling." The words were not cruel. They were factual. She glanced once more at the broken board above them, dust, still settling like judgment. Jonah opened his mouth to speak again, but no sound came out. For the first time since the day began, he had nothing rehearsed left to offer. Ada's gaze returned to Miriam, not angry, not accusing, just clear. "You can sit," she said calmly, nodding toward the sofa. It wasn't kindness. It was control. Miriam hesitated, then obeyed, wincing as she lowered herself. Ada turned back to Jonah. He looked smaller now, stripped of performance, of confidence, of narrative. His earlier restlessness finally made sense. The house was quiet again, but it was a different quiet now, one that followed truth, not lies. Ada stood in the middle of it, breathing evenly, fully awake. Whatever came next would come on her terms. Ada did not sit. She remained standing, arms loosely folded, posture relaxed in a way that felt almost deliberate. Jonah, on the other hand, hovered, half standing, half crouching, unsure whether to kneel, pace, or disappear. The dust in the air settled slowly, coating the room with a thin film of truth. Ada broke the silence with a voice that carried no tremor. "How?" she asked. "Did she get into my house?" It wasn't shouted. It wasn't sharpened. It landed cleanly, like a coin on a table. Jonah opened his mouth, closed it, then began speaking too fast. He mentioned the neighbor again, the charging phone, the misunderstanding, the heat, words scrambling to become a ladder. Ada waited. She didn't interrupt. She simply watched the ladder wobble. Miriam shifted on the sofa, pain tightening her jaw. The pretense of being fine slipped a little. Ada's gaze moved to her, steady and unblinking. "I asked him," Ada said softly, nodding at Jonah, "but you're here. You can answer too." Miriam swallowed. The room pressed in. Jonah shook his head slightly, a silent plea. Miriam looked at the broken ceiling, then at Ada. He gave me a key," she said. "A spare. Months ago." The words sounded relieved to be out. Jonah exhaled sharply, like a man punctured. Ada absorbed it without reaction. No gasp. No recoil. Just a small nod, as if a final line had been added to a ledger already balanced. "Thank you," she said to Miriam, politeness intact. Then she turned to Jonah. "You planned this." It wasn't a question. Jonah's shoulders sagged. He reached for her hand and stopped himself midway, remembering too late that permission mattered. Jonah tried again, this time slower, quieter, almost reasonable. He spoke of loneliness, of mistakes, of moments that grew bigger than he expected. He spoke of intentions as if they were outcomes, of love as if it were a shield. Ada listened the way one listens to rain from indoors, aware, unmoved. When he finished, she let the silence sit. It did the work words could not. "You didn't stumble into this," she said. "You made space for it." Jonah flinched. Miriam shifted again, discomfort now undeniable, her earlier bravado dissolved. Ada walked to the kitchen and returned with a glass of water, placing it gently on the table near Miriam. "Not kindness, order." "Drink," she said. Miriam obeyed, hands shaking. Jonah watched, confused by Ada's calm, frightened by it. He tried to apologize again, the words sounding smaller each time. Ada raised a finger, not sharply, just enough. He stopped. "You hit her above my head," Ada continued, voice steady. "You locked me out. You lied without being asked." She glanced at the ceiling, then back to him. "And you thought rest would save you." Jonah stared at the floor. The house felt suddenly too honest to hide in. Ada moved with purpose now. She picked up her phone and made a brief call, voice low, composed. When she ended it, she addressed Miriam first. "You will leave," she said. "Tonight." There was no venom in it, just finality. Miriam nodded quickly, relief and shame tangling in her expression. Jonah started to protest. Where would she go? She's hurt. It's late. Ada silenced him with a look. I didn't ask for logistics, she said. I stated a boundary. Miriam gathered herself slowly, wincing but upright, collecting her phone from the floor, brushing dust from her clothes like evidence she couldn't erase. She paused at the door, searching Ada's face for something: anger, forgiveness, spectacle. She found none. The door closed behind her with a sound that felt ceremonial. Jonah turned back to Ada, eyes wet, voice thin. We can fix this, he said. Ada considered him for a moment, not as a husband, but as a fact. You broke the part that fixes, she replied. She walked past him, opening the bedroom door, then stopped. Sleep in the living room, she added, almost kindly. The ceiling has had enough. Night deepened. The house breathed differently now, lighter, cleaner, as if relieved to stop lying. Jonah sat on the sofa, staring at the floor, replaying the day in brutal clarity. Every choice returned with interest. Every excuse felt absurd. He texted apologies he didn't send, drafted promises he couldn't keep. In the bedroom, Ada sat on the edge of the bed, steadying her breath, letting the shock finish arriving. Calm, she learned, had a second wave. She welcomed it. She rose, packed a small bag, not dramatic, not rushed, placing essentials inside with practice care. She left the ring on the bedside table, centered, deliberate. When she stepped back into the living room, Jonah looked up, hope flaring. Ada shook her head gently. Not tonight, she said. And not like this. She paused at the door. We'll talk later. With witnesses. Jonah nodded, broken by the precision of it. The door closed. The house settled. The ceiling no longer hid anything. Ada didn't go far. Distance wasn't the point, clarity was. As she sat in the quiet of a borrowed room, she felt something unfamiliar and strong take root. Certainty. The canceled flight had not delayed her life. It had redirected it. Above Jonah's head, the truth had fallen because lies, like ceilings, fail under weight. Back home, Jonah sat alone with the evidence of his planning. The spare key missing from its hook, the dust still clinging to the floor, the silence that no apology could fill. He understood now that the day he thought would be easy had been exacting instead. The house had chosen. And Ada, calm and awake, understood something else. Some returns are not meant to restore what was, but to reveal what cannot continue. Please like and subscribe. Your support means the world to us. Thank you for watching to the end. Don't forget to come back for the next amazing tale yet.